Mondays live on Facebook. We're live streaming Mondays now in lieu of not being able to play at the Jazz Standard on our normal Monday nights with the Mingus Big Band. And my name is David Lee Jones. I'm a saxophonist and part of the Mingus Big Band for some 28 years. And we just happy, I'm honored and happy to be able to bring you this live stream via Facebook today, and we hope everyone is in good health and families are doing well. We pray that everyone is doing well during these times. Certainly the last 100 days have been challenging for the world with this pandemic. I'm sure that most of us have made the adjustments that we've had to make so far, being the new norm, living in the new norm, and which actually seems, surreal. But the good thing is that we have the technology to bring you still entertainment and other sources of information via social media, and this being Facebook. And so, like I said, today I'm going to be playing a bit of the music of Charles Mingus and talking about Charles Mingus's music and his legacy.
David, I think there's no audio coming through on the stream.
Really?
I'm seeing some comments to turn the volume up or that there's no audio.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you all hear me now?
Okay, so Sarah's saying she has audio, but it's just super low.
Super low, okay.
So maybe either lean into the mic or if there's a gain or...
Okay, let me how about now? Can you guys hear me now? Is that better? Is it a little better? Can you hear me now? How about the audio now? Is it better? Can't hear you. I see. No audio. No audio. Okay. No audio. No audio. Okay. Let me switch to computer audio and get away from the microphone. All right. All right. How about now? Can you hear me now?
Okay. People are saying it's a little better, but I'm seeing yes, much better. Yes.
Much better now?
Okay. I think we're rolling.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right, so I don't have one of those take two things that they use in in movie productions, but let me just start over by saying hello, everyone, and welcome to Mingus Mondays Live. Here on Facebook, and my name is David Lee Jones. I'm a member of the Mingus organization. I've been in the Mingus band for some 28 years, and someone's calling me, but I'm not answering that. But I'm happy to be here and honored to be here to bring you this music via Facebook. And like I said before, that I know that many of us have been trying to make the adjustments with the new norm of living during this pandemic and having to quarantine, and not being able to get out and hear music or go to see a show here and there. But the beauty of it all is that we have the technology to bring the music to you via this vehicle of Facebook and other various platforms, Zoom and what have you, whatever. So tonight I'm going to be playing the music of Charles Mingus. And we're going to be taking questions, any questions that you may have about Charles Mingus's music, myself and my association with the Mingus Band. And so I'm going to start out with a piece, one of my favorite pieces written by Charles Mingus, and it's called Peggy's Blue Skylight. And the story behind this piece is that Mingus used to hang out with a writer, a poet from Newark, New Jersey, who was a poet in the 40s and went to Columbia University and became a famous poet. And he was hanging out, they used to hang out at Peggy Hitchcock's, who was a socialite. She had a Manhattan, upstate house in upstate Manhattan, and they used to hang out there. And Peggy had a ceiling, a skylight in her ceiling, and she wanted to tear the skylight out and put a blue skylight there using, replace it with blue aircraft shield plastic. And she wanted to look up at this blue skylight from using the aircraft shield plastic. But unfortunately, she could never get the building permit to do it. So Mingus wrote this song for her, and he titled it Peggy's Blue Skylight. And this, I'm going to be using actually the play-alongs that you can buy actually online, the Mingus play-alongs, and it features the rhythm section, some great musicians. We have Tommy Campbell on drums, the late John Hicks on piano, and our actually musical director Boris Kozlov was the bassist who's in the rhythm section on this play-along. So I'm going to be using this play-along CD to play along, to play this song. Okay, here we are, Peggy's Blue Skylight.
Peggy's Blue Skylight. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, Peggy's Blue Skylight. And let's stop this. All right.
Peggy's Blue Skylight.
Uh-oh. Well, I don't want to hear that.
1, 2, 1.
All right. Thank you, John. That was the voice of John Hicks on that play along CD, and I was just talking to Sarah, Liz, and Zach about John Hicks was worked with Charles Mingus for years and was a prolific pianist and in his own right, and a legend in his own right. And when I first joined the band, he was still in the band and touring with us and doing some gigs. And he passed away a few years ago, and we miss him. But he's very much was an inspiration, to me. So I guess we can take a few questions now. Let's see.
I feel like I heard my cue.
Oh, okay, there we are. Liz is
There.
Liz is on the other line, and she's going to be feeding me the questions that you guys may have. So let's go with the first question. Yeah.
Well, I actually would love to maybe expand a little bit on what you just talked about. You mentioned John Stubblefield, and I can't help but think about the long legacy of wonderful musicians that have all been a part of the Mingus Big Band, all the Mingus bands. How has that affected your experience? Do you have any stories of being on the road with some of these, what we feel are iconic Mingus Big Band characters now?
Yeah, as I was speaking of John Stubblefield, and John was just such a sweet guy, and a great musician, of course, if you know John Stubblefield and his music. I'm from Texas, I grew up in Texas, and John is from Arkansas, so we had that southern connection, to start with, and he had a lot of jokes, which would always keep us laughing, on the road. And the energy that I was speaking earlier about, the energy that John had, during the performances, because Mingus's music, allowed the members to, like, everybody to kind of like shout and just kind of like rave and shout and say things during the music, and because a lot of the music was, some of the music was politically charged, and John just, sometimes when the band would just be sitting up there, just stiff and looking just kind of bored looking, and John would just jump up and holler and say something, "Come on, guys!" and yes, he was like he being in church. So he brought that church vibe, to the music, the hollering and amen and clapping the hands and stomping the feet. And so, that's, what I miss about John. John just had such an energy about himself that just kind of like lit up the bandstand when he was there. So kind of miss that. Road stories, there's a lot of them that I could, talk about. If anything comes to mind, I'm drawing a blank right now, but there's I would think of some, as we go on, some road stories.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about the venues that we've been at the Jazz Standard now for over a decade, but there is some history even that predates that time. Can you talk a little bit? I think you were a part of all that.
As I said before, I joined the Mingus Band in 1992. I came I came to New York in '84, and I went back to Boston. I came back in '90, and I actually ended up working over in Istanbul and Turkey for about a year. And right when the Gulf War started, I came back, and that's when I came back to New York and just, stayed permanently. And I subsequently joined the Mingus band in 1992. And I think at the same time I started working with a group called Diggable Planets, and we had a hit song called I'm Cool Like That. And I was working with Phyllis Hyman at the same time as well. Then I started working with the Mingus band in '92. And the venue that, the way I started working with the band is that someone sent me to sub for them one night. And the band had started a residency at the Time Cafe, which was in the Lower East Side in Manhattan, and it was a downstairs was called the Fez, and it was like a speakeasy, but it was a really, really nice size speakeasy, and oh my God, the vibe there was just incredible. I mean, that place was just when you walked in downstairs, and everything was red. You walked through these red curtains, and just the whole ambiance of everything just fit so well for Mingus's music, and it was like that was one of the best places to play at. Not outside of the Jazz Standard, which is where we are now, which is bar none the best. I think in my estimation the best jazz club in New York. But the Fez had a vibe, and it had such an energy to it, and it was packed every Monday night, and I mean it was sold out every Monday night, and it was pretty much one of the most talked about happenings on Monday nights. So that's where I started working with the band in 1992, and subsequently I think years later we moved to Iridium, the Iridium Club, which is in Midtown, and I think that residency lasted for maybe a year or two, and I think that was in the later '90s, and then the Jazz Standard, we've been there for 11 years, going on 11 years now on Monday nights, and the Jazz Standard is a great, it's one of the best jazz clubs in my estimation. To repeat myself, because of the way that they treat the musicians, and the ambiance there, and everybody's just so nice, and it's a really nice room to play because of the size of it too. And the owner, James Polsky, who originally opened up the club, he's a drummer, and has a passion and love for the music and respect of musicians. So so that's the history of the Mingus Big Band. So, and this is all of this is I have to give props to Sue Mingus, who is the widow of Charles Mingus, and it's all because of her that Mingus's music is still alive. And all of these years have we been working and being able to travel all over the world and play Charles Mingus's music is because of the passion that Sue Mingus has for his music and keeping it alive. So thank you, Sue Mingus. Many musicians, we all owe you. Lots of gratitude for keeping us working.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. We love Sue.
Yeah, Sue's great. Yeah. And also the working staff that's helping keeping the Mingus organization alive and keeping things running. Sarah, Liz, Zach, to give you guys a shout out as well. Keeping things going in the office.
We did get one question in the comments section I did want to sneak in. Someone asked, Ted Davis asked, would you would love to hear you discuss Eric Dolphy's influence.
Oh my God, Eric Dolphy's influence. Yeah, because I've been watching a lot of videos from the period when Charles Mingus had the group with Eric Dolphy and Charles Tolliver, Danny Richmond, and and it, Charles loved Eric Dolphy. And in fact, I think when Eric Dolphy decided to move to Europe and stay, that's when Charles Mingus wrote the song "So Long, Eric," which is one of the songs that's in our book that we play a lot. It's a fun blues. So Eric Dolphy had quite a influence on Charles and his music, and I think Charles wrote around Eric. Some of the tunes he wrote them around Eric Dolphy. So yeah, he had a love for Eric Dolphy, Charles Mingus.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think now would be a good time if you'd like to continue with some more music.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention Clifford Jordan. That's what I was thinking. That quintet was Clifford Jordan, Eric Dolphy, and Danny Richmond, and that was a great group. And there are some videos and recordings, actually, a lot of recordings out. So the next piece I'm going to play is one of my favorites, ballads from that Charles Mingus wrote. And by the way, Charles Mingus was very much, he had a strong love for the music of Duke Ellington and Duke Ellington's writing. And a lot of his compositions, and Charles Mingus wrote in many styles. I mean, there was social political, there was Latin side of Charles Mingus, and then there was the Duke Ellington side of Charles Mingus. And he wrote between Charles Mingus and Duke Ellington. I'm sure the Library of Congress, the vaults are probably just over full now, and they probably had to build another building, another section to house their music, because the more I play with the Mingus band, the more music is revealed to me that I had never heard, and music that's been in the vaults. And for those of you who don't know, that Charles Mingus's music was bought by the Library of Congress. And this next piece, Duke Ellington's Sound of Love, I'm sorry, that's one of his tunes that were Ellington-esque. But Self-Portrait is called Self-Portrait in Three Colors. And it's from the album which is the historic album that was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. And the LP is one of the 5 to 10 LPs that were held as the 5 records that changed the course of jazz, because in 1959, and the 5 records were Miles Davis' Kind of Blue, Ornette Coleman's The Shape of Things to Come, which was the blueprint for our avant-garde jazz or free jazz. Miles Davis's Kind of Blue took jazz in a different direction of modal music, because preceding that, jazz was more influenced by the bebop of Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. So you had a lot of like bebop influence. What Miles Davis's record did was took the music to a new direction and made it more modal and made it more cool. So that was the birth of the cool jazz. So Miles Davis, Ornette Coleman, Dave Brubeck's Take 5, record, which is a record that integrated the music and opened it up to a wider audience. The song Take Fives, I think, was one of the biggest selling recordings in jazz history. But, and so the other one was John Coltrane's Giant Step, so, and then Charles Mingus's and the way the title came up for the record was is that one of the record executives at Columbia had a problem with pronouncing Charles's name correctly, and I don't know if it was because of just maybe I'm sure it wasn't. I'm sure he didn't have a literary problem, but maybe it was just being facetious or whatever about when he called Charles his name. But he used to always say when he wanted to speak to Charles, he'd be like and so Charles ended up naming their album It became like one of the biggest sellers. Better Get It In Your Soul it actually sold 50. The album sold 50 million copies, and Better Get It In Your Soul, one of the tracks from the record, was the actually biggest, the most popular track from that record. So I'm going to play Self-Portrait in 3 Colors, and on the recording, the song is through composed. So meaning that there are no solos, and they just play the melody. It's a beautiful melody, and they play the melody, and each chorus, as each chorus comes up, they embellish the melody a little bit each time, until in the last chorus there's all of these contrapuntal lines going against the melody. But it's just pretty much the melody for like about 4 choruses. So I'm going to play that, and I'm going to play about three or four choruses, and I'm going to start off with just the melody, and each time I'm going to embellish the melody and play a little bit of chord changes. Self-Portrait in 3 Colors. Duke Ellington-esque. Charles Mingus' self-portrait in 3 colors. Okay, so let's see. I think we have some questions.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
We do.
go right ahead.
One question that I think is actually, I want to know for myself. Thank you for sharing. I'm curious what you might think about the fluidity of Mingus music, tempo and style changes, for example, and how that works on stage in an ensemble.
Yeah, tempo and the tempo and fluidity of Mingus's music and how it worked on stage and with the ensemble. Well,
Mm-hmm.
for one thing, Mingus back in the day in the when he used to have a jazz workshop, and that's what we call it actually, the jazz workshop. And Mingus was always writing music, and he would always they wouldn't have rehearsals, so the jazz workshop was like rehearsals, like a rehearsal performance. And Mingus always wrote music that challenged the musicians. And he would always bring the music down to the performance, and the guys would have to read it on stage on site. And he was very passionate about, you know, his music being played correctly. And you know, as those of you who knew Mingus knew he had a temper. And I think there's a story that goes one performance. They were playing a piece that Mingus had pulled out, and pianist Jackie Byard was playing something wrong, and Mingus looked over at him with a real mean look, and he put his bass down. And as soon as he put his bass down, Jackie Byard got up and ran out of the club because you know, Charles had a temper, you know, and if he didn't play his music right, you know, sometimes he would get a little physical. He would be a little physical about it. But you know, with that being said, you know, a lot of his music is very challenging, and a lot of it goes through tempo changes, key changes, and in fact, there's one piece that we have in the book that's called Number 29. And Mingus wrote this piece to challenge the musicians, because musicians always thought that they were such good readers, and guys had egos, they're like, yeah, I can read anything. And so he said, okay, well, this is for all these musicians who think that you're such good readers. And needless to say, the chart number 29 is not something that you can just sight read. You know, you definitely have to take it home and work on it for a while, because it's very challenging. And so, but you know, I personally like that, you know, and I think a lot of musicians who are in the band, you know, like that challenge. We love being challenged to be able to play, you know, and read things that, and a lot of times there are songs that we pull out of the book that, you know, the band hasn't played, and there's so many, like I said, just a vast archive of music, and there are some that sometimes whoever's leading the band may pull out of something that we had never played, and we'll just read it on the spot, and yeah, you know, that's the challenge of being. It challenges your musicianship, and that's what it is. That's what it is being a jazz musician. You know, being able to test your skills to see, you know what level you're on, and needless to say, you know, being in New York, you know, jazz musicians, we have to be on a certain level in order to say we're jazz musicians. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. What are your favorite big band charts to play?
One of my favorite big band charts out of the book. Oh, there are many. OP is one, which is one that Mingus wrote for the famous bassist Oscar Pettiford. let's see, Fables of Faubus, which is one that was written, which is a piece that was written uh, for the racist Governor Orville Faubus, who, back in the day during the civil rights, after the civil rights bill was passed, the governor of Arkansas refused to integrate the schools, and he sent out the National Guard to block black kids from attending white schools. And so Mingus wrote this piece that sort of like mocked Orville Faubus, and he called it Fables of Faubus, and I think that's on the record. So, and there's so many. I mean, there's I mean, there's so many. There's another one, Open Letter to Duke, that I like playing. That features actually me, which is a ballad. Yeah.
Yeah, and as an extension of that, what are your favorite Mingus compositions? Like, what are your favorite Mingus recorded compositions?
Okay, one of my favorite Mingus recorded compositions, I would have to say, I like Don't Be Afraid, the Clown's Afraid Too. And Mingus had like some really eccentric names for his compositions, like Tonight at Noon, The Shoes of the Fisherman's Wife Are Some Jive-Ass Slippers. Yeah, I mean, he was very eccentric with the names. That he had some really eccentric titles. Us is Two. Meditations on a Pair of Wire Cutters, which was written about the Japanese prisoners that the American had taken prisoners after Pearl Harbor, and during the threat of communism, when they were rounding up everyone who they thought was a communist, they rounded up all the Japanese and put them in concentration camps in California. And Mingus wrote a piece called Meditations on a Pair of Wire Cutters. Meaning that, they were meditating on, I wish they had a pair of wire cutters so they could cut the fences that they were being, held in prison. But there's many. I mean, I'm sure I'm not even mentioning all of the ones that I like. There's several that I really like.
Amazing. Not sure if you read or the last time you read the autobiography Beneath the Underdog.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts or any opinions about that? We have someone that's asking, what did you think about his autobiography? I like that there was no guest writer.
Well, yeah, even the title itself shows you how eccentric Mingus was, Beneath the Underdog. I mean, I just think that, Mingus, in reading Mingus's books, my takeaway from reading his books and the things that that highlighted my thoughts the most was just that how way ahead of his time he was. Mingus only lived, I think it was 56 when he passed away, born in 1922, and passed away in 1979. And just the amount of music that he wrote in that short amount of years was just incredible. You definitely you begin to understand how much time he put into writing. And of course, outside of him being an incredible bass player, because he got to start playing with Charlie Parker, in the 40s when he came to New York, in the 30s, in the 40s. But reading the book Beneath the Underdog, just let me know that how much ahead of his time he was. Yeah. I saw a question here when someone, piano bass,
I wonder if we're thinking about the same question. I have here.
they're scrolling and I lost it. Where?
Yeah. No worries. I have one that just popped up for us.
Uh-huh.
At what point in Mingus's career did his music become an avenue for political speech? And did his instrumentation or musicality change to accommodate the political message?
Now repeat that question because that was a kind of long question. So repeat that again. I have someone here that I think from Charles Mingus. This is Charles Mingus. David is using the Mingus More Than Play Along available through Hal Leonard. So I was supposed to plug that. Yeah.
No, you're fine. You're doing great.
Yeah. Okay, but can you repeat that question again?
Sure. So I have, at what point in Mingus's career, in your opinion, did his music become an avenue for political speech? And did his instrumentation or musicality change to accommodate the political message?
At what point did Mingus's music become a vehicle for political messages? That's pretty much what you're saying, what you're asking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, that I wouldn't know at what point in his career because I'm not sure of the actual timeline of certain pieces were written. All I know is that a lot of his music is political based.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that to answer you the second part of your question is that how did the instrumentation apply to the political realm of the music? Mingus never had a big band. He could never afford to put together a big band, and a lot of his group was small groups, meaning a quintet, sextet at the most, 6 pieces at the most. And it was his dream to have a big band and put on because he wrote the music for the Epitaph. He wrote Epitaph, and he never had a chance to hear it before he passed away, but he wrote his Epitaph. And I think it was supposed to be the concert was supposed to be performed at Carnegie Hall, I believe, and it was never. He passed away before he had a chance to even for that to become into fruition. And so this is why Sue Mingus created the big band, because this was Mingus's dream to have a big band all of his life. And so I think that he wrote around whatever economically he could afford to take on the road and be able to pay. Of course, big bands cost a lot to pay, and it costs a lot to take on the road, to travel with. So yeah, his I think a lot of times he just wrote his music in whatever instrumentation that he was able to use. He wrote it around that instrumentation, and later certain arrangers like Gunther Schuller, Steve Slagle, and other various other people. When the big band was formed, they took these charts and they rearranged them for a large ensemble. And I was also speaking of economics. I know many of us are yearning to go back out and be able to go listen to some music live and go to Broadway to see a show here and there. And it's just kind of surreal to see New York the way it is, because you're talking about one of the entertainment capitals of the world, and and people are probably just going stir crazy with cabin fever. and can't wait until the opportunity arises for clubs to open back up. And well, with that being said, musicians and entertainers are taking a pretty big hit, and you know, not only entertainers, everyone is, you know, taking a pretty big hit in terms of work and being out of work. But unfortunately, you know, with the closing of clubs, you know, entertainers and musicians are taking, you know, quite a big hit in making a living, especially those of us who make a living, who with playing music and performing. So with that being said, I'm looking for there we go. Since the clubs are closing and the Mingus organization, the musicians are not working, you can make your donations to the Mingus organization via PayPal. We have a PayPal account that is called paypalme.me/Mingus. No, Mingus Bands, I'm sorry. PayPal.me/Mingus Bands. And if you also want to be on the mailing list for the Mingus organization, you can go to www.mingusmingus.com. And if your fingers are not able to type that many Minguses in, you can just go to www.charlesmingus.com and you get on the mailing list. And also the Mingus Play Along book. We have all of these books are published by Hal Leonard. We have the Mingus Play Along book, which is the book that I'm the Play Along CD and book that I'm using to play backing tracks from. There's also the Charles Mingus Fake book, which has all of the Charles Mingus tunes with the correct changes in them, because the fake books that, you know, I've seen that has a lot of incorrect changes in the chord changes. If those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. And there's another book called Big Band Charts. All are published by Hal Leonard. And then there's also the book that Sue Mingus has out. Is called Tonight at Noon, and I have a copy of it somewhere. I think I loaned it out. But all of these things you can purchase online. You can purchase all of the Mingus CDs via Amazon and CD Baby, correct? CD Baby and Amazon. There's quite a few. We have, here's the one that was live at the Time Cafe, which is the club that I was talking about. That the first club that the band started playing it live at Time, and I think it was nominated for a Grammy. This one that we recorded over in Europe, Gunslinging Birds, was nominated for a Grammy, and the big band actually won a Grammy for Best Large Ensemble with the CD entitled Live at the Jazz Standard, which is the club that we're in residency in now. So we are a Grammy-winning group, Grammy-winning organization. Yay! Two thumbs up for the Grammy. So yeah, Grammy-winning organization, Grammy-winning band. Okay, so looking at some questions here. Please leave comments. There was one question that got by me that I saw that kind of like interested me. Oh, that was Sarah. Okay. All right. Any more questions from?
I think no. I think we're probably in a good place to maybe kick into the third tune.
Okay. Yeah. I agree. So the next song that I'm going to play for you is actually from the title CD entitled Gunslinging Birds. And this is the pictures from Mingus when he was shooting a film for independent film. They were making a film at one of his friends' estate upstate New York. And he played the part of Pancho Villa. and he wrote this song Gunslinging Birds for Charlie Parker, and the caption on the song is if Charlie Parker was a gunslinger, there'd be a lot of dead copycats. so this song Gunslinging Bird is for, and actually it's written for Charlie Parker. So I'm going to use the backing tracks for this one as well. Let's see if we can get to them. Gunslinging Birds. There we go. All right.
Gunslinging Bird. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Gunslinging Birds. If Charlie Parker was a gunslinger, there'd be a lot of dead copycats. I'm pretty sure everyone knows what that means. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. All right. Let's see if we have some questions. We have a question here. point, okay, at what point, here's one from my sister, Sharon. Hi, Sharon. At what point in Mingus' career did his music become an avenue for political speak? And oh, that's the one that you already. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. Well, that's the one I've already answered. Okay, that was from my sister, of course. It sounds like a question that she would ask, you know. But someone asked me that I have an interesting story that I went to Berkeley from 80 to 84. And I remember during my senior year, I was writing a lot of big band music and orchestral music for my senior concert. And the concert became an epic show, meaning that it was one of the most talked about shows during that time. And it was I had a professor who was my arranging professor, and he was a Mingus buff. He ate, slept, breathed Mingus, and every time we would come to class during my composition and arranging class, he would put on Mingus's music, and I'm not exaggerating, the whole semesters it would be about Mingus, 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 Mingus. Everything was Mingus, Mingus, Mingus. So at the time, I wasn't that much into Mingus music. I was very much into the music of Quincy Jones because I loved Quincy's lush style of writing and arranging. So I was preparing this concert for a huge orchestra. I had like a 35 to 40 piece orchestra on stage, and with first half of the show was small bands, and the second half was like with string section, French horns, cellos, violins, violas, cellos, and full orchestra. And as I mentioned earlier, as I stated before, I was very much into the style of Quincy Jones. So subsequently, the show got a lot of press, and it was a lot of accolades, and it was called Jones Tones, featuring the Love Jones Orchestra. Yes, I did come up with the title. And subsequently, I won the Quincy Jones Award for Outstanding Musicianship. So when I turned in my scores for my grade, I got my scores back out in my mailbox, and my professor had written all over my scores, because none of it was Mingus-esque, and there were no Mingus tunes in the show. He wrote all over my score and all of my scores in red ink. Well, writing like this, you will never be an arranger, and you'll never be, this and that and the third. And so I just kind of chalked it up as like, oh, this guy's just kind of hating on me, because he's probably never played professionally in his life. And so I said to myself, okay, well, if this is the case, and I showed him, I said, well, you said that I'd never be, an arranger, but how did I get this award? The Quincy Jones Award, so pretty much I'm just not even listening to what you're saying. I'm just showing you this award. So so I say all that to say, I'm saying all that to say that subsequently, when I ended up moving to New York, I ended up being in the Mingus big band for 28 years, and so I don't look at it as saying nah. You said that I would, but look at me now. I mean, I look at it as that in a lens, through a lens, whereas that was Mingus maybe telling me back when I was in school, study my music because I'm coming for you. You know what I mean? Or I look at it through the lens of that was Mingus' spirit, because Mingus had just passed away in '79. And so, and Mingus, people with that amount of creativity and that amount of creativity and intense music that they leave here, like Charlie Parker, Duke Ellington, and Mingus, these people are here for a short period on Earth, but they're here eternally because of what they left behind, the body of work that they left behind. So I look at it as, Mingus' spirit was there, prompting me to, or saying to me, look, study my music because I'm coming for you to be in my band, pretty soon. And so that's my Mingus story of my early days of studying Charles Mingus' music in college.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've had the pleasure of hosting a high school competition. This past year was our 12th year. For any students out there that are watching that are probably studying Mingus as we speak, what would you say to them? Perhaps to anchor that energy and that curiosity.
Yeah, that's correct. The Mingus organization hosts the high school Mingus competition every year, and they have some incredible high school bands playing the music of Mingus, and those kids can really play. And the question is, what would I say to those young high school students who are studying the music of Charles Mingus? Is that definitely dig into Mingus's music and study his harmonic structures and the way he wrote around the harmonic structures. A lot of his melodies are very interesting. In terms of how sometimes they go against the rules, and in jazz there aren't any rules actually. When you think about Western classical music, whereas you have to stay confined within the rules of counterpoint when you're writing, things have to be strictly, written in a way, whereas there are rules when you're writing classical music. Within jazz, there are no rules. There are no wrong notes in jazz. But my message to young kids who are in these high school Mingus competitions and playing the music of Mingus is that there's something you can get out of every piece of music, everything that you listen to. Everything that you hear comes from somewhere else. Every piece of music that's written today that you hear on jazz records, the person that wrote that, the person that wrote it got the influence from listening to something else. So there's something you can get out of Mingus's music, whether it be harmonically, whether it socio-politically, or it could be in his style of writing melodically, but there's something you can get out of it, and I would say just listen to as much of it as you can and take what you can from it, take what you like from it, and if you plan on continuing a career in music and being a professional musician, take from a little bit of everybody, but definitely there's a lot you can take from Mingus's music.
Absolutely. I think that's a great closer. Thank you so much, David, for taking the time with us and being a part of our Mingus Mondays Live. We appreciate you deeply. Tune in next week. We're going to be up and doing the same thing, same time, same bat channel.
That's right. That's right. Thank you guys so much, for having me. And like I said, I'm honored, and I'm just so honored to be able to present this live stream session, playing the music of Charles Mingus and talking about Charles's music. Thanks guys for tuning in.
Thank you, thank you.
See you down that long road.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye now. Everybody be well and stay safe. All right.
Okay.
It's a wrap. Yeah. All right.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Great. That was a great stream.
Good.
Now here on the screen, there should be, if you look at the screen, there should be something that says share to timeline or post to timeline.
Yeah.
Go ahead and click on that.
Say in